Before we jump in today, I want to hear from everybody watching. Today's guest says he cannot live without sunshine, and honestly, I can definitely relate to that. Earlier this year on the Latin American Summit cruise, IAPA's Latin American Summit cruise, I don't think I missed a single sunrise the entire trip because I'm absolutely a sunrise person too. But there's something about sunrise, fresh air, new beginnings, a new day that changes the energy and perspective. So I want to know from everybody watching, what is one thing you or your frontline team can't live without during a chaotic Saturday shift? Is it coffee? Is it sunshine? Is it a playlist? Is it comfortable shoes? Maybe just you're running on pure adrenaline. That's okay too. But drop in the comments, because if you've worked in this industry long enough, you know those peak capacity days are a different sport. So while we're at it, let's also be honest. When your venue gets slammed, what strains your culture the most? Is it your guest volume? Is it technology hiccups? Is it communication breakdowns? Because today we're talking about something every attraction eventually runs into. How do you keep service alive when the operation gets hard? Because we know that culture doesn't reveal itself when everything is easy. Culture reveals itself during the sold out Saturday, a understaffed shift, the moment leadership either shows up or disappears. And in the experience economy, your frontline team isn't just operating your business, they are the experience. All right, we're back. Welcome to Live with Sondra. You guys don't know this, but I'm like sitting back here dancing every time they play that intro. I'm your host, Sondra Shannon, CEO of Gatemaster Technology. And before we jump in, I do want to thank our sponsor, Gatemaster. At Gatemaster, we believe technology should support people, not replace them, because great guest experiences happen when your frontline staff has tools, visibility, confidence to focus on the guest instead of fighting systems. Technology should remove friction, not create it. And in today's attraction industry, operational clarity and human connection have to work together. Because when your team thrives, your guests can feel it. And today's conversation is all about that. So before we get started, a quick shout out to all of our podcast listeners tuning in around the world. We appreciate you being part of the Live with Sondra community. And if you are watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow the new Live with Sondra YouTube channel so you never miss an episode as we bring together voices in the community shaping the future of the experience economy. So let me introduce you to our guest today. Today, I am joined by Ryan Minton, author, speaker, and founder of Thanks for Coming In Today. Ryan focuses on building high-performance cultures where frontline employees thrive and customer service stays living and a breathing priority. He's a huge advocate for what he calls the privilege of leadership, teaching managers how positive influence directly transforms the guest experience. And apparently, one thing that Ryan says he cannot live without is sunshine. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for coming in today, Sondra.
Thank you.
And also, I should let you know that I too was dancing to your jingle there.
I think I saw you backstage dancing.
It's great to be with you.
it's good to have you here. And yeah, I thought that was pretty cool that you said the sunshine. I mean, you are is Florida the Sunshine State?
It is, yeah. I've been here 6 years. I moved here from Ohio after most of my life in Cincinnati. I had to escape to the sunshine. Cincinnati's home. I love it there, but man, you cannot, you can't substitute the year-round sunshine.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, people from Florida hate when I say this, but I'm in Denver.
Mhm.
We have more sunny days in Florida.
Do you though? I don't. I'd have to look into that. I don't know if I fully believe that.
I mean, that's what. Listen, I'm not a native. What do they call them? Color. I'm not native from Colorado,
Yeah.
but that's what I'm told. And I will say this: I being from Southern California, which I know they do not have Southern California beat because Southern California weather is the best on the planet, just
Yes, I agree.
hands down. Um, but I will say this: it's a nice close second. I do feel like the sun's out all the time, so even if it's snowing, the sun seems to still hit you
That's
in a good
important.
way. Yeah, it is important.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for us to also talk about this thanks for coming in today philosophy. And I know that's something that your brand is built around. And so I'm curious, why does this mindset matter so much?
Well, there's a story behind things coming in today that I'll share with you. My background is hospitality. I spent 25 years leading and managing hotels, primarily Marriott brands. And so my very first job was at a front desk of a Marriott in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I was surrounded by a group of customer service rock stars. And I know that because week after week, Marriott would rank us against all the other properties. And we would be always in the top 10 out of 300 plus hotels, which was always pretty incredible when you consider, we were not a destination hotel. We were a corporate hotel, northern suburb of Cincinnati. People weren't exactly vacationing in Ohio.
Sure.
So, but we were outranking, hotels in California and Florida. But we just had an incredible team. But there was one young man on that team that was unlike anyone I'd ever met, and that was Jason. And Jason at the time was a hospitality student at a local university, and he absolutely loved working at the Marriott. He loved coming into work every day. He was always so pumped to come to work. He was always happy. He's always smiling. And Jason would come, and I was a front desk manager. So Jason would come up to me every single shift when he would arrive. He'd seek me out no matter where I was. And he'd give me this big handshake. And he'd say, "Ryan, thanks for coming in today." And it was always so funny because, I was his boss. Like I should probably be thanking him, but Jason would thank me. And he did this with everybody. He did it with his coworkers at the front desk and other departments, housekeeping, food and beverage. He did it with our guests. I always tell people I was pretty convinced Jason was pounding Red Bulls in the parking lot before every shift because he was always that like high energy when he came into work. And so as Jason moved up in his career, he got his degree. I became a general manager at another hotel in Cincinnati, and I had a front desk manager position open. And so I called Jason. At this point, we were friends. And I said, "Jason, I want you to come be my front desk manager." And so he did. And immediately Jason comes in, and his everything about him is just infectious. Everybody loves being around him. He's just his energy. He's always so positive. We start to see scores go up in his department. We start to see people calling off less. Like people love to work with Jason. About 3 months after I hired Jason in that role, July 4th, 3 a.m., my phone rings. And, hospitality industry, unfortunately, 24/7, phone rings overnight a lot. It's never good. I've received all the calls, fire sprinklers going off, the sprinkler head, the toilets are overflowing, the breakfast chef is calling off, you name it. But this was the worst call that I'd ever received. It was on the other end of the line was Christina. Christina was Jason's fiance, and they were going to be married later that year. And she was sobbing, and she was letting me know Jason was not going to make it to work the next day because he'd been killed in a car accident.
Ugh.
And I remember hanging up the phone with Christina like it was yesterday, and kind of inched to the side of my bed and just started, processing what I just heard. And over the next few weeks, in mourning Jason's passing and processing it, one thing that I quickly recognized was how much I was missing him coming up to me every single day and giving me that handshake and saying, "Thanks for coming in today," because he did it every day without fail. And so I spent a lot of time on that. I spent a lot of time on why. And what I really landed on became the foundation of my entire approach to people, to leadership, to customer experience. And it was that every time Jason said, "Thanks for coming in today," to me, even though I was his manager, his boss, it made me feel like I mattered. I felt appreciated. I felt valued. And so um, I made a decision that I was going to honor Jason. And so for the last 20 plus years, I have taken on the baton of doing exactly what Jason does: go up to employees, guests, give them a handshake and say, "Hey, thanks for coming in today," without fail every day. And, when I would get a new property or a new employee and I would say, "Hey, thanks for coming in today," and they haven't heard it before, I would get some funny responses sometimes like, "Well, yeah, you pay me to be here, or you scheduled me." And I love to explain those moments. No matter what job someone does in an organization, it matters.
Yeah.
And especially in the attraction industry, we all know that if someone calls off, we're understaffed, it impacts the entire shift, the entire day. And so I found a direct correlation in my career to happy employees equals happy guest. And it's Bill Marriott 101, which he says, take care of the customer, or take care of the employee, they'll take care of the customer. And so this is something that I've embraced my entire career, and I've seen it play out time and time again. When you have people that genuinely enjoy coming to work, you are much better positioned to provide a great guest experience. And so I'm very passionate about that. I'm very passionate about the frontline employee. You think about the fact that our attractions, our brands, the world's most recognizable brands for customer experience, they're entrusting their entire reputation into the hands of frontline employees. And so that's the story behind Thanks for Coming In today.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, I didn't know that's where we were going, but I definitely can appreciate the legacy that you're carrying on for him. And then also, like, what a cool thing that he did to say thanks for coming in today. I mean, I like that idea of thanking people for that. One, because you're right. I mean, you can't. One of my mentors always said, you can't build empires without people, right? No empire is built by one person. So you need a happy, healthy team.
Yeah.
Showing up every day. And so while that's something so simple, it can also change the way the frontline employees in attractions, theme parks, and hospitality see their role.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's really awesome. So you also talk a lot about the privilege of leadership, and I think it's interesting because in this industry, especially during peak season, leadership can become reactive really fast. And I know that in those moments, so many managers lose sight of that privilege when operations get stressful. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm really excited. I'm really excited this time of year because I get invited to help speak to leadership teams that are kicking off their busy seasons in the parks. I mentioned to you off air, I'm heading to Colorado next week to speak to the Waterworld team. And a couple months ago, I spoke to Kings Island, which is my home park. It's where I started. My very first job was at Kings Island when I was 16 years old in Cincinnati, Ohio. And the privilege of leadership that I talk about actually stems from that first summer there. And so in my book, Uplifted, which just came out last year, I talk about how I remember, and look, that was 30 years ago. It's hard for me to admit that. But I remember that summer like yesterday. And I had two supervisors that summer, Stephanie and James. And Stephanie, well, let me talk about James first. James, which wasn't his real name, by the way, we'll protect the guilty here. everyone dreaded when James was on shift. When we saw that we were scheduled and James was the supervisor of that shift, we dreaded coming to work. He was a bully. He was, a tyrant. He was difficult to work for. I remember like yesterday him bragging about how many employees he could make cry in the summer. Like
Oh,
he kept a tally. But then there was Stephanie, who, when Stephanie was there, we loved coming to work. We loved being around her. And me personally, she saw something in me that I could not see in myself at that time as a 16-year-old. I was shy. She started to build confidence into me that I didn't know I had. And she was just an encourager. And so, um, my life, I really believe, and I write about this, would not have taken the path that it did into hospitality had it not been for that summer with Stephanie. I mean, and seeing two very different types of management styles and saying, okay, I want this in my life. I want to be, not this. And so when I talk about the privilege of leadership, I'm talking about the fact that if you're listening to this and you manage someone, whether it's one person or 1,000, doesn't matter. Someone has entrusted you into managing someone's day, a human being. They're trusting you to manage their day. And, we spend 8 to 10, 12 hours a day at work. In the attractions industry, sometimes longer. We spend more time in work than anywhere else, more time than with our family. And so how cool is it that if you manage people, you get to be in a position where you can make those 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day the best part of their day, not the part that they dread. And I just think that is such a gift if you get to do that. And so the best leaders embrace that and recognize that they are in a very unique position that not everyone gets to be in, where you get to make someone, because here's what I believe. I believe that people, when they wake up in the morning and they're thinking about, oh, I got to go to work today, or I don't want to go to work, or do I want to go to work? The answer to that question is whether or not they like their boss.
yeah.
If you really scale it down, I think it's really down to that. And so, if you're going to have any chance at getting through the day on these busy Saturdays that you're talking about, well, they better like coming to work for you. I mean,
Yes.
that's step one. And so I believe that leadership is a privilege. And in our industry, it's an even more unique privilege, because how cool is it that you work in an industry where you get to be someone's first boss? I mean, I had a first boss at Kings Island. And I preach this a lot when I speak to leaders at parks. Every summer, you get to be people's first boss. It's their first job. They're going to remember you the rest of your life, their life. And so the question is, how are you going to be remembered? Are you going to be like Stephanie? Or are you going to be like James? And I think that is really cool. And even if you're not someone's first boss, Sondra, you can be oftentimes someone's first example of what a great leader looks like. Because unfortunately, a lot of people have histories of bad bosses.
Yes.
So to me, that's why leadership is a privilege.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's interesting. I've never thought about this before, but I remember my first boss,
We all do.
right? Yeah. And amazing. Taught me so much about business. It's one of the reasons that I was a general manager by the time I was 19. I started about 30 years ago. That's what that base was about. Because I'm like, oh, I hate admitting that. But at 19 I was general manager, and I got to be the first boss of my whole team.
General manager of what?
I have a QZAR laser tag in Southern California. That's how I
I
started in
love
the
it.
industry. Yeah. So it was a privilege. And what's interesting to me today, 30 years later, or that was in the late 90s, I still get messages from these people, many of them,
Yeah.
thanking me for that time.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know what I was doing. But to your point, I think I knew that I wanted people to love coming to work.
Yep.
And I think and that still is true for the work that I do today, because I'm one of those people, and maybe I think maybe you'll share this. I wake up, I go to bed every night ready, like so excited about tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do at work tomorrow? What's the next adventure I get to go on, or
Yeah.
who do I get to interview? And I want the people around me to feel that too.
Yeah.
And
It's
so that's
contagious.
such a cool way that you put it.
Yeah,
So,
it is. It because and you're hitting on something I talk about. When you do this, you're fueling yourself.
yeah,
I mean, it makes your life a lot more easier and more fun. Let's just be real. I mean, you know, where's the fun in being a, I typically share three principles with people when I speak of how you got to have these three principles in place. First impressions matter, which, each one of these I dive into, but we won't be able to do that here today. But the second principle is don't be a jackass.
yeah,
Kindness is a strategic advantage
yes,
in today's work environment in all industries. I mean, people have so many options. They don't have to tolerate bad behavior anymore. And why would you?
yeah.
So,
Well,
and
and
the
let's
third
be real.
is blow people away.
If I'm being completely real, and you were to ask a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? Nobody is ever going to say managed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting an interesting thing is at the end of the day, you're leading, you go first,
Absolutely.
right? Well, when we look at creating this thriving frontline culture that you talk about, how can operators tell whether their culture is truly thriving or just surviving? And what are those signs?
Well, a big sign is retention, is people showing up, call offs, all those things.
Yeah.
But the general vibe, I think, is indistinguishable. When people really enjoy coming to work, the people that they work with, um, you know, and if you're a leader listening to this, you can't do it by yourself. Um, Especially if you have leaders around you and leaders on your team. And so, one of the things I talk a lot about is, surrounding yourself with the leaders that share that. You can have this vision and you practice this every day, but if you've got a James on your team, you're not going to be able to fully embrace this. And so, I always said, when I look at my leadership teams, if I have anybody that's not buying into this, I see them as a threat to my mission. And so that is a key part is when you build out your teams and the extensions of you, whether it's supervisors or shift leaders, they have to embrace this. They have to buy into this as well. But when you have this at play, you know it, you feel it, you enjoy it. Those busy, crazy Saturdays are not quite as difficult. And I'm a realist. Like there's always going to be those tough days. But one of the things I talk a lot about is I have a no bad day policy, and I hate the word policy. I call it a dirty word. It's the P word. I think policy gets in the way of a lot of great customer experiences when we start to make things black and white. I think some of the best customer experiences happen in the gray area when we do things for guests that maybe we wouldn't normally do, but it's the right thing to do. So I always tell people I throw all the policies out the window. HR loves me, not really, uh, but the one policy that I have is the no bad day policy, which
Yeah.
is if you are a leader on our team, if you work here, you don't get to have a bad day. And I know this could be a little controversial, especially in a day and age when we're all about our feelings. But I just really believe that if you're serious about creating an environment where people want to come to work, you don't get to have a bad day. Now I know you have one. I have them. We're all, human. But the point here is that your team doesn't know it because we've all worked for those folks where, they wear their emotions on their sleeve. We, don't know what kind of mood they're going to be in. That's not fair. It's not fair to our team. So, so I embrace the no bad day policy to kind of make these environments work. And it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, but you can get there.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's a real skill, right? I love that no bad day policy. I'm a big believer that we create good days, right? Like
Absolutely.
that is something that is completely in everybody's power, and sometimes it is about making some of these shifts that you're talking about. And yeah, I love that, and I agree. I think as a leader, you're not there to dump on your people,
Right.
right?
Yeah, we've all had
So
those leaders that do.
yes,
Yeah.
we all have. I think that's actually why I became my own boss, was because I had a leader who did that to me at
Yeah.
some point, right? And realized I wanted to do different. But back then, there weren't people like you out there teaching and making change for what can happen in leadership. But that also kind of brings me to my next question, which is, what is the very first thing leadership should do when customer service starts feeling robotic or emotionally draining?
So I teach and talk a lot about the importance of service basics. One of the things that I find a lot of organizations that are not doing well in customer service is that they have not defined what their basic expectations are around service, and then they're teaching it and they're living it every single day. And so, um, Ritz Carlton in my world in hospitality, Ritz Carlton is viewed as a a level of service that other industries aspire to be at. You'll hear people say all the time, "I want to be the Ritz Carlton of the whatever industry." And so Ritz Carlton does this, and it's like, all right, well, if they're the standard and that's what everyone does, why doesn't everyone do it? But they define down into a card that employees carry around with them what their basic expectations are around service. And so you do have to teach this. And so I find when I am asked to help organizations that are not doing well in service, I quickly see they just aren't talking about it. They haven't defined it. And what am I talking about here? Service basics. Well, things like, um, you know, escorting guests instead of pointing. When someone asks for directions in an attraction or a park, um, using my pleasure instead of no problem, or whatever you may want to do. The biggest game changer, the biggest service basic game changer that I am the biggest proponent of is the 15-5 rule. And the 15-5 rule, for those that are listening that don't know what it is it's within 15 feet, you make eye contact and you smile. And within 5 feet, you say something, you engage. Hello, how are you? And to your point, robots or whatever, don't script this. You don't want everyone saying the
Sure.
same thing. But it's, my background in hotels was going into hotels that were underperforming in service and flipping them. And so the biggest thing we would do right away, day one, was like everyone had to understand we practice the 15-5 mantra. And so you have to start modeling it as leaders, and then eventually it starts to take on. And then when you start to have people that aren't doing it, then they kind of get self-called out. But imagine if you're in an environment where everybody's doing this. This changes the feel, it changes the vibe. So the 15-5 rule is crucial. But in general, back to your original question, is you have to revisit, what are those basics? Does everyone know what they are? And how do we bring them to life every single day?
Yeah. Well, I think it's also important to point out. I mean, I love that 15-5, and I love the idea of having conversations with guests, right?
Yeah.
But I think one thing that I do hear often these days, especially in our position at Gatemaster, we work with a lot of frontline employees. They're struggling to have those conversations. And I think it's important to point out, too, that like that's a skill you have to let your people learn to do,
Yes.
is have conversations.
Yeah.
And maybe give them a framework, but at the end of the day, like, know that people are going to have to develop that ability to speak to people. And that is, and I 100% agree. I love Ritz Carlton. Just spent the weekend a couple weeks back at the one in South Beach, and how many times people said my name.
Yeah. Which is a
It's like,
basic that we teach. Use the
yeah.
guest name.
I know that being in hospitality and attractions, I know that that's something they've been taught to do, but it still means the world to somebody
I
who's.
don't know about you. I love hearing my name. It
Me too.
feels, yeah, it's like, I don't know what that is, but we love hearing our name. And it's important.
Well, it makes you feel like they care,
Yeah.
right? And I think they do, especially if they are enjoying the day and having a good day,
Yes.
right? And I think that that shows in their ability to do that. But one thing I do see, especially in the attractions industry, operators struggle with is how they are maintaining positive leadership energy when their employees are dealing with high volume, stressful guest interactions all day. And I'll tell you, I was at one of my local parks here in Denver. It was not Waterworld,
Mhm.
and it was a holiday, and there was we're waiting in line. I'm a big fan of eliminating these lines because I think
Yeah.
this creates some of the stress. But um, I was waiting in a line for I don't know, one of my kids wanted like chicken fingers or something, and one of the cashiers behind the counter was in tears,
Mhm.
visibly in tears, and I know that a lot of that had to do with the high volume, high stress. The guests are yelling at them, but how maybe could somebody support their team through that, or maybe even prevent a situation like that? Because that
Yeah.
didn't make me feel good
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
sure. I feel
well
bad for
well,
that.
part of that is as consumers and customers, we need to do a better job of treating our frontline employees with dignity.
100%.
That's something that I preach a lot about. I don't understand why we let out our frustrations on people that have no control over the situation. But in that, and every situation's different, but you know, being there for them, obviously planning and creating systems and places that and processes so that when those moments happen, they're not as what you described. I would imagine if I were able to look behind the curtain at that operation, I'm going to find some poor leadership. I don't know that for a fact, but most of the time that's the case. Um, they're not supportive. They're not because one of the hardest things I ever did was manage a hotel during the pandemic, and we were running 100% occupancy down here in Florida with 10 people when we needed 200. It was brutal. It was honestly hell. And I had those employees in tears. I had those folks that were getting beat up by guests, and we just created places, environments where they knew that you know we were supportive and empathetic to what they were going through, and providing that space for them that they could know that they were safe to share that. Um, it's it's hard. It's hard in these environments when it gets that crazy and that busy. And so I really believe that how we are in the moments when it's not busy are going to contribute to how they react in those moments, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I also think, like, to your point, we are dealing with the general public often who are not trained in ways that we can train our frontline staff to deal with problems. But I think arming them with enough good information to be able to deal with those tough moments, because it's going to happen, because we can't control who's
Yeah,
coming through the gate always. And I recognize it, and I'm in 100% agreement with you. I'm that person during Christmas. If I see somebody treating people bad, I will say something.
I do too. I
And
Yeah. One of these days, I'm probably going to end up going viral because I got recorded for something. But
right. Like I'm like, come on, it's
yeah,
Christmas. Why are we treating these people the way that we're treating them just because they're in a place of service?
yeah,
And so I love that you called that out, because
yeah,
that's important to me. And I think it's important that, we do teach our frontline employees that those people exist, right? I'm a big fan of the four agreements. What other people say isn't necessarily about you. So also teaching them to not take that personally when those
yeah.
moments happen. But yeah, I can really appreciate that. And I'm curious, as far as culture and ROI and retention, because I'd like to talk a little bit about the business's performance. From your experience, what is the direct connection between when employees thrive, and that factor of employees thriving, and the guest willingness to spend more money on site?
Well, I'd say all the time, whatever's happening on the inside is always felt on the outside by the customer. And so when I would go into these specifically these hotels and turn them around, there was always a direct correlation to once we established expectations, we established service basics, we got everybody the tools they needed to do their job. That's always a big thing for folks. I find a lot of times we are not providing folks with the right resources or tools to make their job easier. um, Oftentimes it's the basics. It's like, what do you mean the housekeeper doesn't have a working vacuum? Like, so once you get all those things in place, you start to see the environment shift. You start to see people more engaged at work. People are more happy to come to work. And then right behind that, what starts to happen is you start to see scores go up, or if you're doing guest surveys or whatever it is, however you're measuring guest feedback, you start to see that improve. And then right behind that, you start to see repeat customers. You start to see increased, spending. All of it is tied to that. It all comes back to an engaged culture where people actually want to come to work.
Yeah. And I think you kind of answered this earlier too. Like, I mean, the Ritz Carlton gets the money they get because the elevated level of service.
Yeah.
People want to pay for that. And
Yep.
that's what I think in attractions, we need to start making that shift, right?
Hmm.
Because we are seeing more of a demand for elevated experiences
Hmm.
and special experiences, things that people want to pay. I mean, this is a whole other conversation about the economics around attractions right now. We know that this younger generation is more willing to spend their money on experiences than things, right? So why wouldn't you create an experience worth spending money on, right? And
Yeah. I mean, I personally, I have a 4-year old, and we just went to Disney 2 weekends ago. And there were instances where I willingly spent more money
yeah,
to have a better experience, especially with having a 4-year-old in tow. One of the things that comes immediately to mind, and I'm surprised how many people haven't figured or learned about this yet, but are these minivans at Disney World? Are you familiar with the minivans?
no. Tell me
Yeah,
about the minivan. I'm a fan of minivans because I got
yeah.
three.
Well, they're not technically minivans. They're SUVs that are named after Minnie Mouse,
Oh,
but they're these red SUVs. Then they use Lyft as their platform, like Uber, but Lyft. But they're Disney cast members. They're Disney vehicles, and they're the alternative to the trams, to the boats, to the skylift. You can literally get picked up by an SUV at the park exit and entrance, and they move you around. And it was just a game changer. And it was a premium. We paid a little extra for it, but um, I thought, wow, this is amazing. We aren't waiting in line. We're not being slowed down by waiting on the mass transportation. And the vans were impeccably clean. The drivers were awesome because they were actually Disney cast members.
yeah,
So that's an instant where we're like, yeah, we're gonna probably never do this any other way now.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
I just
awesome.
gave them a free plug.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'll tell you, like I always say, like when I retire, I'm going to become a monorail driver. That's my
Well, you
goal.
might want to be a minivan driver.
I might want to. Yeah, that's the thing. I was just
Yep.
thinking I'm going to have to change it up. Maybe become the minivan driver. That's awesome.
Yep.
Well, yeah. I mean, and you're so to your point. It's that elevated experience. It's something different. It's something new. It's something that maybe I have to pay extra for, but it's going to change the overall experience.
Yeah.
And I know we're getting close to time, so I have a couple more questions I want to ask you. I'm trying to decide what question to ask you, but I think um, because we have Gatemaster as one of our sponsors for this show, looking at technology and the human touch, where in the guest journey do you think technology helps frontline staff shine rather than just getting in the way? What do you see that shift with
Well, when
technology?
done right, it's beneficial everywhere. I mean, I go back to something I said earlier in the show. One of the things that we focus on when we help organizations with their service is do do they have the tools they need to do their job? And there's so many tools now that help employees be in a position to better service the guests, to have those conversations that they couldn't normally have because they were, you know, knee deep into some type of technology or something that was slowing them down, where now there's technology that makes it easier and faster. Um, I think there's so many cool things out there, so many tools to make life easier for the frontline employee when it's done right, so that they are freed up to create these moments that we want them to create these stories that they will tell. One of my favorite guests, we mentioned Disney, or books, we mentioned Disney already, but one of my favorite books is Be Our Guest, by the Disney Institute. And it talks about how in all of their research, the number one thing that people talk about is not, the rides, the cleanliness, the park, the food, it's their interaction with cast members. And
Right.
so if we can use technology to free them up to have these interactions, that's a win.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. And also, I just on that, I mentioned the Latin American cruise. We had uh, Silver Dollar City was there, and they were speaking on behalf of the Hershey Parks, and they have this great story about a person who is nonverbal that kept coming back with her family, and they even moved close. I think it was to Dollywood, so that she could have those interactions with guests. And that's the kind of impact we're talking about when we talk about guest interactions. It's life changing
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, it is. They'll remember it the rest of their life.
Yeah. Well, I have some rapid fire questions for
Okay.
you.
It's fun.
Okay. So, what is the most underrated leadership trait?
Empathy. People just want to be heard. And I use it for if you ask that question for customer experience, I'd say the same thing. I talk about empathy being a superpower. People
Yeah.
just want to know you get them a lot of times and you
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. I think everybody wants to feel understood, right?
Mhm.
At the end of the day. So I don't know if this is going to be the same answer, but what's one thing every frontline employee deserves more of?
Respect
I love that.
from leaders, from customers.
I love that. What's the biggest mistake managers make during peak seasons?
Uh, oh gosh, so many. I would say not practicing empathy, not being there for the poor cashier that you described, was someone there for her to let her know this is not what we want you going through, and I'm sorry this happened.
Yeah. Well, to your point on that, I can't tell you how many times I've been at a park as a patron and said to the staff, "It's okay."
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
know, why are we not doing that more for our teams? I love that. So, besides sunshine, what keeps you grounded?
Well, my son is 4. He's my world right now. But a big thing, that I would share with your audience, especially in these busy environments when you're stressed, is carve out time to practice gratitude. Um, you know, that for me always helped me in these moments when it was hitting the fan, when,
Yeah.
the literal fire drill. Um, you should have time to yourself, even if it's 5 minutes in the parking lot before you go in, and just give yourself a moment to say, what am I happy about? What am I grateful for right now in my life? And I've found when you do that, it really helps your mindset for those busy days.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Gratitude is like an incredible
Yeah.
force to
Yes.
have
Yeah.
behind you if you're in it. Well, Ryan, for everybody watching and listening today, how can people get a hold of you, follow your work, or learn more about your thanks for coming today?
RyanMinton.com. You can find ways to connect with me there, and always happy to connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan, for being here. I
Thanks for
appreciate it.
joining
This
me
was
today.
gold. This is a great show.
Awesome. I
This is
enjoyed
a
it. We'll
really
do it
great
again.
show. Yeah, we should do it again.
Yeah.
Maybe next time in the studio.
Yes.
In studio. Well, thank you, Ryan, for being here. I'll see you soon. All right. Well, this conversation was amazing. I mean it when I say it was a great conversation. It's probably one of my favorite shows. That what a cool guest to have here. But what really stands out to me the most about this conversation is that culture is not just an HR initiative; it's infrastructure, and it can determine how well and supported your team feels. So I want to leave you with a couple of things. Again, thank you, Ryan, for coming here and for reminding us all that service isn't just something organizations should say, but it's something that people should feel. And for everybody watching today, one thing we know in the attractions industry is that unforgettable experiences are never created by systems alone, they're created by people. So at Gatemaster, we believe technology should help teams feel more empowered, more informed, and more connected to the guest experience. Because when systems support people properly, service stays alive, teams stay engaged, and guests come back. Thank you again to everyone for joining us live and for all of our podcast listeners around the world. And thank you again to everyone who makes this show possible. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, and follow. We have a new Live with Sondra YouTube, so we're trying to bump up those numbers. I really appreciate it if you head over there and give us a follow, or even just share this conversation if it resonated with you. I'm Sondra, and this is Live with Sondra. I'll see you next time.